a vast, starless sky. Silent, endless, empty. Then a faint ripple across the darkness, like the surface of still water being touched. No sound, no light, only the quiet hum of something awakening. Ancient, restless, waiting to become. Long before the temples, before the statues and the thrones, before Zeus raised his thunderbolt or Athena picked up her spear, there was only chaos. Not the kind of chaos we think of now. No screaming, no fire, no war. Chaos was stillness. Chaos was space. Chaos was the yawning nothing from which all things began. Greek mythology, like a dream told at dawn, begins not with certainty, but with silence. And from that silence, the first shapes stirred. The primordial deities, the first beings out of chaos, came Gaia, the earth. She was not created. She simply was, solid and slow and deep. Then came Tartarus, the shadowy underworld, and Eros, not the winged boy with a bow, but a primeval force of desire and connection. Nyx, the night, unfolded her black cloak across the sky. Erebus, the deep darkness, lingered at her side. No temples were built for them, no hymns sung. But without them, there would be no Olympus, no heroes, no wars, no love. They were not gods in the way we know them now. They were conditions, atmospheres, the early mood of a universe just beginning to breathe. Gaia and Uranus, sky meets earth. Gaia in time gave birth to Uranus, the sky. And like the horizon that separates the sea from the air, he lay across her. Together they began to populate the world. From their union came the Titans, 12 powerful beings, each vast and ageless. Oceanus, the endless river that circles the world. Hyperion, the Titan of light. Rhea, who would one day give birth to Zeus. And Cronus, the youngest, and soon the most dangerous. But Gaia and Uranus also birthed less fortunate children, the Cyclopes with a single eye, the Hecatonchires, 100-handed giants, and others too strange and ancient to name. Uranus, repelled by their monstrous forms, banished them deep into Gaia's belly, into Tartarus. And Gaia, though vast and eternal, felt pain. Not physical, not even emotional, as we understand it, but the pain of being betrayed by your own creation. The first betrayal. Cronus rises Gaia, wounded and watchful, decided to strike back. She made a sickle of stone, and she went to her sons, the Titans, and asked for justice. Only one stepped forward. Cronus, the youngest, the cleverest, the most ambitious. With trembling hands, he took the sickle. And one night, as Uranus came to lie across the earth, as he always had, Cronus struck. With a single sweep, the sky was severed from the earth. Uranus bled stars, and from those drops, strange beings were born. The Erinyes, the giants, and more. Cronus had overthrown his father, and so began a pattern that would echo through all Greek myths. Children rising against their parents. A cycle of power gained, and then lost, like waves rolling up the shore, only to be pulled back again. The Golden Age, or so it seemed. With Uranus gone, Cronus became the ruler. He married his sister Rhea, and for a time, the world was calm. This was called the Golden Age, a time without war, without hunger, without laws, because the myths say none were needed. But beneath that golden sheen, seeds of fear had already taken root. You see, Cronus had heard a prophecy. One day, one of your children will overthrow you, just as you overthrew your father. So, when Rhea bore her first child, Cronus acted quickly. He swallowed the baby whole. Then the next, and the next, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, each child taken into his belly, not out of cruelty, but out of terror. A mother's quiet rebellion. Rhea, devastated but wise, made a plan. When her sixth child was born, a boy, she wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and handed it to Cronus. He swallowed it without looking, and she spirited the baby away to a cave on the island of Crete, where the child would be raised in secret, hidden from his father's fear. His name was Zeus. But that is a story for another night. A narrow cave mouth, tucked high in the mountains of Crete. Inside, a soft blue light filters through cracks in the stone. The hum of bees, the gentle drip of spring water. And in the shadows, a baby stirs, wrapped in linen, surrounded by silence, and destined to shatter the sky. Zeus, son of Cronus and Rhea, was born not into a palace, but into hiding. As his siblings slumbered deep inside their father's belly, Zeus was nursed by a goat named Amalthea, guarded by warriors called Curetes, who clashed their swords and shouted to drown out his infant cries. Because if Cronus had heard him, if he had known, the cycle would have ended right there. But fate, it seems, has a fondness for hidden children. Growing up in shadow, we don't know much about Zeus's childhood. The myths are vague, half whispers in the dark, but we imagine him running barefoot over mossy stones, learning the taste of mountain air, watching thunderclouds swirl overhead, unaware that they would one day obey his will. And perhaps he listened closely to the wind, because eventually he understood his purpose. He would not just survive, he would set things right, not by words, but by force. The trick that freed the gods. Zeus returned to his father's court in disguise. Cronus, grown comfortable in his tyranny, did not suspect. Some say Zeus slipped a poison into his father's wine. Others say he gave him a potion from Gaia herself. Either way, the effect was immediate. Cronus vomited up his 5 children, grown but untouched by time. Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Demeter, goddess of the harvest. Hera, future queen of Olympus. Hades, lord of the underworld. Poseidon, god of the sea. The 6 siblings stood together for the first time, not as victims, but as a force of reckoning. The Titanomachy, 10 years of thunder. What followed was a war so vast, it split the world. The Titanomachy, a battle between the old gods, the Titans, and the new gods, the Olympians. It lasted 10 years. The skies roared with thunder. The mountains cracked, oceans boiled, and the very earth groaned beneath their fury. Zeus led the charge from Mount Olympus, flinging bolts of lightning that scorched the sky. Poseidon shook the seas. Hades raised the dead to fight. But the Titans were strong, ancient, rooted in the bones of the world. The war turned into a stalemate until Gaia offered help once more. The monstrous allies, Gaia told Zeus of the Cyclopes, the one-eyed smiths imprisoned deep in Tartarus, and the Hecatonchires, the 100-handed giants. Zeus descended into the underworld, defeated their jailers, and freed them. In gratitude, the Cyclopes gave Zeus his thunderbolts, Poseidon his trident, and Hades a helmet of invisibility. With these divine tools, the Olympians struck hard. Cronus was overthrown. The Titans were chained and cast into Tartarus, bound for eternity. The war was over. The birth of Olympus' victory brought peace, and with peace came order. Zeus became king of the gods. He took his throne atop Mount Olympus, a mist-shrouded peak said to exist between earth and sky, visible only to those who believe in stories. Poseidon ruled the sea. Hades took the underworld. Hestia tended the hearths of both gods and mortals. Demeter fed the land. And Hera, well, she married her brother Zeus and became queen. As you do, a new divine family with old problems. But peace is a fragile thing. Though Zeus ruled with strength, he was also flawed, ambitious, proud, often unfaithful. And Hera, though wise and regal, was quick to anger. Their marriage, like many royal unions, became a storm of betrayal, jealousy, and grudges. The next generation of gods, Apollo, Artemis, Athena, Ares, and others, would be born into a house not of harmony, but of thunder. Because though the Olympians had overthrown their parents, they could not escape them. Power, after all, is an heirloom with sharp edges. The halls of Mount Olympus. Not cold marble, but something warmer. Pillars lit by firelight, floors woven from clouds and gold. Statues shift in the candlelight. Footsteps echo. Laughter in one room, arguing in the next. This is not a paradise. This is a palace, and it is very much alive. Mount Olympus was not a place of stillness. It pulsed with energy, with stories waiting to unfold. Zeus, now king, was no idle ruler. He fathered gods and demigods by the dozen, with goddesses, nymphs, and mortal women alike. Each child a thread in the tapestry of myth, each a spark, a secret, a problem waiting to grow. Tonight, we meet the children of the gods, born into chaos, destined for greatness, and almost always at odds. Athena, born from a headache. Let's begin with a birth that defies all logic. Zeus once swallowed his first wife, Metis, after hearing a prophecy that she would bear a child more powerful than him. Problem solved, he thought, until one day he began to suffer a blinding headache, a pain that split the sky. He begged Hephaestus, the god of fire and forge, to do something. So Hephaestus took an axe and split Zeus's skull open. From the crack leapt Athena, fully grown, clad in armor, sword in hand. She was the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and warfare. Not a child, not a warrior, but both. Cool-headed and fearsome, she became one of the most revered figures in all mythology, never born, never mothered, and never outsmarted. Apollo and Artemis, sun and moon twins. Next came Leto, a titaness who bore twins by Zeus, Apollo and Artemis. Their birth was anything but peaceful. Hera, furious at the affair, cursed Leto so that no land would allow her to give birth. Leto wandered for days across the sea until she found Delos, a floating island not anchored to land or sea. There, under a single palm tree, she gave birth to the moon and the sun. Artemis came first, calm, precise, goddess of the hunt and wilderness. Then Apollo, brilliant, radiant, god of music, prophecy, and light. Together, they moved in balance, night and day, wildness and reason, silence and song. But even harmony can hum with tension. Apollo's pride would lead him into rivalries and loss. Artemis's independence would guard her fiercely from love, and both would leave their mark on gods and mortals alike. Ares and Hephaestus, brothers in contrast. Hera, not to be outdone by Zeus's prolific parenting, bore children of her own. Two sons stand out, Ares, the god of war, and Hephaestus, the god of fire and forge. Ares was everything war can be, glorious, reckless, brutal. He strode across battlefields, adored by chaos. But he was not loved by the other gods. He lacked strategy, lacked depth. Even Zeus found him tiresome. Hephaestus, meanwhile, was born deformed, and Hera, ashamed, cast him from Olympus. He fell for a day and a night before landing in the sea, where he was raised by nymphs and learned the art of crafting. He built wonders, forged weapons for gods, constructed golden palaces and living statues. He was clever, quiet, resilient. But like so many gods, his bitterness lingered, especially when Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and his arranged wife fell for his own brother, Ares. Aphrodite, love, beauty, and a trail of trouble. Aphrodite's origins are ancient and mysterious. Some myths say she was born from the sea foam, rising where Uranus's severed body met the waves. Others say she was the daughter of Zeus and Dion, Regardless, she was irresistible. Not just beautiful, but beauty itself. Every god wanted her. Many mortals worshipped her. But love, in her hands, was a wild creature, never tamed, always testing. She made lovers of mortals. She punished those who spurned her. She lit the flames of the Trojan War by offering Helen of Troy as a prize. And while she was often seen as soft, gentle, or shallow, those who underestimated her paid dearly. She was love, and love, in myth, is always more dangerous than it looks. Rivalries and dysfunction. The children of Olympus grew in number. Hermes, born to a mortal woman, became the messenger of the gods, a trickster, a thief, a guide to the underworld. Dionysus, born from Zeus's thigh, brought wine, madness, and liberation. Each had their domain, each had their story. But they did not always get along. They quarreled, schemed, sabotaged. Olympus, for all its immortality, resembled a deeply flawed family. Loud dinners, bitter secrets, and endless sibling rivalry. And over all of them, Zeus ruled. Not with peace, but with a thunderbolt in one hand and fear in the other. Wind howls through jagged stone. Far below, the world turns. Fires flicker in tiny villages, stars glitter in the heavens. But here, at the top of all things, a figure lies chained. His skin is torn. His eyes burn, not with pain, but with defiance. This is Prometheus, and his story is not one of gods ruling men, but of gods fearing what men might become. Long after the Titanomachy, the great war between Titans and Olympians, ended in thunder and smoke, a quieter war began. Not between gods and gods, but between gods and mortals. And at the heart of this new struggle stood Prometheus, whose name means forethought, a Titan, but not like the others. He did not love power, he loved humans, fire and defiance. Prometheus had watched the gods shape the world, watched Zeus take his throne, watched mortals stumble in the darkness. And he did something unthinkable. He gave humanity fire. Not just the flame that warms and cooks, but the fire of invention, of knowledge, of rebellion. He taught them writing, medicine, architecture. He showed them how to survive, how to think. And in doing so, he disobeyed the king of Olympus. Zeus, furious, struck back, not at Prometheus alone, but at all of mankind. He gave them a gift with a hidden curse, Pandora, Pandora's jar, curiosity unleashed. Pandora was not wicked. She was curious, beautiful, clever, and unknowingly dangerous. She was given a jar, sometimes mistranslated as a box, and told never to open it. Naturally, she did. Out flew all the evils of the world: disease, jealousy, war pain, and last of all, hope, fluttering like a leaf at the bottom. The world changed that day. Mortals would suffer, and the gods would watch. Prometheus punished. As for Prometheus, Zeus reserved a punishment that was more poetic than cruel. He had him chained to a rock, high in the Caucasus Mountains, and each day an eagle, sacred to Zeus, would come and eat his liver. Each night it would grow back. The cycle continued for thousands of years, a divine reminder that even gods could be afraid, because what Zeus feared most was that mortals, with knowledge, might someday rise, and perhaps, just perhaps, do what the gods had done to the Titans. The wrath of Zeus was not always the wise ruler he claimed to be. He could be petty, jealous, and unrelenting. When mortals displeased him, he sent storms, floods, plagues. He destroyed whole cities, turned kings to beasts, cursed bloodlines for generations. When Sisyphus tried to cheat death, Zeus condemned him to roll a boulder forever. When Ixion lusted after Hera, he was bound to a spinning wheel of fire for eternity. These weren't just punishments, They were messages, messages to mortals. Know your place, the gods and the makers. But the gods were not just rulers, they were also creators. They crafted heroes to act as bridges between worlds. Perseus, who slew Medusa; Heracles, son of Zeus, doomed to labor and glory; Orpheus, whose music nearly conquered death; Theseus, who navigated the labyrinth. Each hero a spark, each story a glimpse of the fragile bond between man and God. Sometimes allies, sometimes tools, always walking a line between blessing and punishment. The quiet fear of Olympus. And so, the gods ruled. But their power came not just from lightning bolts or magic. It came from order, from distance. They kept mortals in awe, kept knowledge just out of reach, kept Prometheus in chains. But they knew, somewhere in the flicker of every torch, in the stroke of every chisel, in the whisper of every prayer, the greatest threat to Olympus might not be a titan, but a human. A gentle river winding through a lush forest, dappled sunlight filtering through leaves. Soft music plays, a lyre, distant and delicate. The scene feels timeless, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for stories to unfold. Stories of love, loss, and change. Greek myths are not just tales of thunder and battle. They are stories of love in all its strange and twisting forms. Love that creates, love that destroys, love that transforms. And through these tales, gods and mortals intertwine, sometimes in harmony, often in chaos. Tonight, we'll drift through some of these tales, quiet, slow, and full of whispered secrets. The tragic love of Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus, the greatest musician and poet, was gifted with a voice that could charm stones and rivers. He loved Eurydice, a nymph as gentle as the morning dew. Their wedding was a soft song, but happiness was brief. Eurydice was bitten by a serpent and died, slipping into the dark realm of Hades. Orpheus, unwilling to accept this fate, journeyed to the underworld, his music softening the hearts of gods and spirits alike. He begged for her return. Hades agreed, on one condition: Orpheus must not look back until they reached the surface. But as they neared the light, doubt and longing overcame him. He glanced back. Eurydice vanished forever. Love lost, sealed in a glance. Zeus's many loves and their consequences. Zeus, as we know, was no stranger to love or mischief. His affections sparked countless stories, each filled with beauty, deception, and tragedy. From Europa, whom he abducted in the form of a bull, to Leda, seduced as a swan, to mortal women like Alcmene, mother of the mighty Heracles. Many of these affairs angered Hera, leading to jealous revenge, curses, and complicated family drama. Children of Zeus often bore the weight of their father's passions and the wrath of their stepmother. Yet their stories also remind us that even gods can be flawed, and their love, messy. Transformation and punishment. The shape-shifting gods. Greek myths abound with tales of transformation, whether as punishment, escape, or disguise. When gods grew jealous, angry, or playful, mortals often paid the price. Daphne, chased by Apollo, was turned into a laurel tree to escape. Arachne, a talented mortal weaver, challenged Athena and was transformed into a spider. Io, loved by Zeus and tormented by Hera, became a cow, wandering the earth. These transformations were not just physical changes, they were metaphors for loss, survival, and change. And through them, the myths teach that identity is fluid, and sometimes survival means becoming something else entirely. The gentle power of Demeter and Persephone. Among the gods, Demeter's story is one of maternal love and seasonal change. When her daughter Persephone was taken to the underworld by Hades, The earth itself mourned. Crops failed. The world grew cold. Only when Persephone returned, half the year spent with her mother, half with Hades, did the earth bloom again. Their story is a quiet reminder of the cycles of loss and return, death and rebirth, a slow rhythm that continues beneath our feet, even as we sleep. Love's endless echo. These myths of love, sometimes cruel, sometimes kind, resonate because they reflect human experience. Love's power to heal and hurt, to bind and break. And through these stories, whispered softly in the dark, we see that gods are not so different from us. They laugh, they weep, they fight for what they want, and sometimes they change, just as we do. A quiet library at dusk. Rows of ancient books rest on wooden shelves, dust motes floating in fading light. The air is heavy with stories, tales told and retold through centuries. Outside, the stars begin to appear as if listening. The myths live on, in whispers and dreams. Why do the stories of the Greek gods still matter? Why do these ancient tales, whispered across millennia, continue to captivate us as we close our eyes at night? The answer is simple, yet profound. They speak to the deepest parts of our humanity. Stories that explain the world. Before science and technology gave us answers, myths filled the gaps. Why does the sun rise and set? Why do seasons change? Why must we suffer loss? The myths provide stories, a language of symbols and metaphors, to make sense of the mysteries that surround us. They helped early people find comfort in chaos, meaning in pain, and hope in darkness. The gods as mirrors of ourselves. The Greek gods are not perfect. They are proud and petty, loving and cruel. They argue, deceive, and sometimes hurt those they care about. Their flaws make them relatable. In their struggles, we see echoes of our own. We see our fears, our desires, and our dreams. Mythology in modern life. These stories have shaped art, literature, and culture for thousands of years. From Shakespeare to modern films, from the names of planets to the stories in video games, Greek mythology is woven into our collective imagination. Even as we fall asleep tonight, the echoes of these myths linger in our dreams. A quiet invitation. As you drift off, consider this. These stories are more than old tales. They are a quiet invitation to explore our own humanity, our hopes, our flaws, and our endless capacity to change. They remind us that even in the darkest night, there is light. Even in chaos, there is order. And even gods, with all their power, are not so different from us.